Hello and welcome to the latest instalment of MFS's Let's Talk Property podcast, where we connect with industry experts to explore an array of topics within the dynamic world of property. Before we dive into today's episode, I want to take a moment to share a quick disclaimer. MFS are a bridging loan and buy-to-let mortgage provider and are not financial advisors. The opinions and views expressed in this episode are personal to the hosts and guests and may not reflect the views of MFS. For more information on MFS, you can find us at www.mfsuk.com and be sure to keep up with our podcast updates on Instagram at MFS_LTP. Now, let's get started. Hello and welcome back to the MFS Let's Talk Property podcast. I'm sat here with Perdip Bhachu and we're going to talk about your experience and everything else. So let's get into it. Diving right in, can you tell me a bit more about yourself and what you do and where do you work?
Sure. So I'm a senior associate solicitor at Blacks.
Amazing.
Blacks Solicitors, we're based in Leeds, so our headquarters are Leeds, but we do have a London office based. In terms of what I do, I specialise in property, so predominantly buy-to-let transactions. I've been qualified for over 14 years.
Oh, wow.
I manage a team of people.
Yeah.
I also manage the trainee solicitors within the department, so anybody carrying out a training contract within the residential property team, I am their supervisor and I will provide them with a high-quality level of training and also actively take part in growing the business, in dealing with business development activity. Just in terms of Black Solicitors, we're a very, very large firm. A bit of history behind the firm itself. So we've been around for about 35 years. Yeah. We merged 3 firms together in 1989. Hence, we've created this particular product of Black Solicitors. Now, initially, the firm specialised in crime. Okay. However, if you fast forward 35 years, we now specialise in multi-service legal services. So we deal with property, we deal with corporate, commercial, family. You can basically name it. Sure. But obviously, the biggest arm of Black Solicitors is the property team, which I'm very, very proud to be a part of. Yeah. In terms of the firm's vision statement, so what we have is basically writing on the wall. So if you come visit the office, you'll see what I mean. And our vision really is to be a trusted advisor, to be the go-to advisor for commercial high net worth clients, and to provide a very, very high level of client service. So exceptional service, and that's what we really prize ourselves on. In terms of the property team, we're very large indeed. So there's around about 70 of us circa. Oh, wow. And we all specialise in buy-to-let transactions. Wow. So that's ranging from things like HMOs to company purchases, corporate portfolio refinances. It could be where an individual is looking to become a landlord. So private landlords that are brand new or even established landlords, really. So we really do work with a lot of the specialist lenders, albeit we work with high street lenders, but really our key topic really is specialist lending and how we can look after the lenders.
Okay, all right, brilliant. Is there a specific way you work with all lenders and borrowers, or does this type of work you do for each client vary?
So every lender has different requirements, albeit that they're based around about pretty much the same models. Each lender is specific because it depends on whether the product that you're working on is a regulated product. Sure. It could be an unregulated product. Could be a lender that's adhering to the UK Finance Lenders Handbook. Could be a building society which adheres to completely different rules. So for that reason, we do tailor what we're doing for that particular lender as per their special conditions. And I know that that's one of the gripes that some lenders do have, because they say, do you really read the special conditions? Because sometimes when you refer things to us, or solicitors have in the past, it doesn't seem like they've read the instructions. I can, hand on heart, say that I do read the special conditions, and I do try to ensure that we are adhering to your particular requirements as a lender. In terms of a private landlord, completely different requirements, and that just depends on the type of transaction. So obviously, like I said to you, it could be a private landlord that's starting out for the first time. Say they're purchasing a HMO property. They wouldn't have the knowledge that you would expect that an established landlord would have. So it's just providing them with the tailored advice to that particular type of transaction, making sure that they know exactly what they need going forward in order to be able to use that property, for example, as a HMO.
I mean, what would you say are the main challenges you face working as a solicitor in the property sector?
So main challenges, I have to say, is people understanding the process of a conveyance, which sounds rather simple, but actually it's vital. Now, as a lender, obviously, I would expect the lender to have the financial expertise. And as a solicitor, I'm expecting that I would have that expertise and that other people would expect that of me. I don't expect you to understand my process and vice versa. However, what we do need to do is educate each other to overcome that. And the reason why I say that is purely because if you look at the kind of journey of a transaction, you've got your individuals that have negotiated their transaction. So if it's a purchase transaction or a refinance transaction, that individual client has already set in their mind exactly what they're looking to establish, because they've started that process. Now, they've either gone to a broker and obtained the mortgage offer, or they've gone to a lender directly. If they've done that, they've got a mortgage offer. Now, this process can take a couple of months, which we're all well aware of. By the time they've gone down the line, they then eventually instruct solicitors. Now, our problem sometimes that we can be faced with is the fact that we are at the tail end of that transaction.
And there's a deadline.
There is a deadline, and that's the problem. But we do try to adhere to that deadline. But we also then find ourselves having to educate people as to the conveyancing process. Unfortunately, it's not as easy as submitting a certificate of title and asking for the drawdown of those funds. There's a lot more that happens. Even before we start the legal work, we have to carry out regulatory requirements and checks. And that's even before we've looked at any of the paperwork. So when I start looking at the complex and the intricacies of that particular transaction, I then have to work through the lender's requirements. I have to ensure that I'm protecting the client's interest as well as the lender's interest. And then I can ask for the drawdown of funds.
And as you say, you come in at the tail end, and there are deadlines set by the lender and the borrower, of course. So you're being pushed from both angles. What do you think is the best way to approach solving that sort of problem?
So I would say to solve it is just educate each other. So like I said to you, I don't expect you to be an expert in my area, and vice versa. I'm certainly not an expert when it comes to the financial aspects, because I am a solicitor, and my job really is to protect the lender and the client from a legal perspective, and that's what I adhere to. Now, education is key. We need to be telling each other about what we're doing and educating about our processes. If I understand your process and you understand my process, when it gets to the point of being instructed, you will then understand that I will have a certain process that I have to go through in order to achieve that common goal. So education could be via blogs, for example, which I do write quite a few blogs.
That's great.
Anybody's blogs, it doesn't have to be mine. Anybody's blogs where they're educating people as to the process. Not just educating lenders, educating landlords as well. Clients need to understand the process. Or it could be education via any videos, for example, which I actually have my own series of residential property buy-to-let videos. They're snippets of different legal topics where people can basically have a quick look at to gain a little bit of knowledge, and the whole aim behind that is to impart knowledge, also to cover that particular challenge that I face. Now, the videos, you can actually get a hold of them, excuse me, on our YouTube channel for Blacks Solicitors, on social media as well. But here's an exclusive. I've just recorded the series 2, so there's a whole raft of new topics. They're currently being edited, so hopefully you'll be able to get access to those as well. But the aim behind it is to impart that knowledge. If we're imparting that knowledge, we're making people feel fully informed as to that process and understanding particular points. What is involved in a personal guarantee? What are the intricacies of HMOs? What are the rules behind it? If you're looking to do a multi-property finance, what's the complexities behind that particular corporate setup, and are they actually able to do that? So these are the kind of topics that I would cover. So I do really think education is key.
No, I think you're completely right. I think the knowledge gap is really where the issues lie, and once we both understand, the specific job that each person has to do, that's where we can really get to the solution as soon as possible. So, and
then the other thing that we also can come up against is communication.
Why
are we not communicating with each other? I like to think of us as a golden triangle, and I refer to this many a times. So we have the lenders, the solicitors, and the brokers. We're all trying to achieve a common goal. So why are we not picking the phone up and speaking to each other? It solves so many issues. So providing having effective communication really between the parties is key, and also accurate and adequate information. If that is provided at the stage of mortgage application, it will make my life as a solicitor so much more easier, of course. Full disclosure. And that can also be done by way of communication as well. So when I get a client, for example, they're telling me how they're funding a purchase, for example, they need to have told the broker or the lender directly as to the origin of those funds, the source of funds. And as a solicitor, I don't just look at source of funds, I will look at the source of wealth. So I'll compare where the funds are held, how they've been accumulated, and then also look at the general wealth of that particular client to assess that. And they're just my regulatory requirements that I have to adhere to. So in doing so, I need that client to tell you, the lender, the correct information, so that when I get your mortgage offer, I can then confirm through the special conditions and verify that information. That makes the process so much more smooth.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. And you've already touched on it, referring to the golden triangle.
Definitely.
But how important would you say is having a good relationship with the lenders in these sort of transactions?
Most definitely important. Like I said to you, we need each other.
Yeah.
We're all three components of a very, very, very important process.
Yeah.
Without each other, we can't action. So if you don't produce that particular offer, I won't have any legal work to do.
Yeah.
And if I don't do the legal work, you won't be able to provide the completion of that and successful conclusion.
Yeah.
So it's really important that we have a really good relationship between ourselves as lenders and also with the clients directly.
Yeah.
The whole point is that I'm protecting the lender's interest so that I'm able to provide a clear and marketable title,
Yes.
so that the lender security is protected, really,
Yeah.
isn't it? So if anything happens to that particular property or that client, the lender has some fallback provisions, and that's what key points I have to keep in mind when I'm looking at these transactions.
Yeah.
And for a client, obviously, they want to have a trusted advisor.
Yeah.
They want to have somebody who knows what they're doing. And for that reason, I'm also looking for that particular client to protect their interests.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
that's also another challenge, sometimes explaining to people that actually I'm not only acting for you as the private client, but also for the lender.
Yeah.
I'm your eyes and ears for a lender,
Yeah,
really.
yeah.
And I've got to do that legal work to make sure that you're safe,
Yeah.
so that you can provide that money. And it is your money at the end of the day,
Yeah,
it's not
yeah,
my money.
yeah,
So
of course, yeah.
I've got to make sure that I've looked at everything, gone through all the requirements,
Yeah.
and that you are happy to proceed with that.
Yeah. I'm going to go a bit off script here, but
Sure.
in terms of everything you've mentioned about relationships and the golden triangle and communication, how are you able to maintain that in times when it's super, super busy? Because there have been times, especially in the last couple of years, where there's just been the log of deals to do is just ridiculous. How do you maintain that, and how do you work in those sorts of circumstances?
So that's really simple.
Yeah.
The way that we work at Blacks is that, like I said, there's around 70 of us.
Yes,
We're
yeah.
broken up into smaller teams.
Yeah.
So the way that the teams individually work is that you'll have a case handler who is your point of contact.
Yeah.
So that's the person that will have contact with everybody involved in a party.
Okay, yeah.
They'll be assisted by their assistant, so a conveyancing assistant. But behind the scenes, there's going to be a solicitor like myself that's acting on all the work.
Oh, right,
It
okay.
then leaves me to carry on with the legal work,
Yeah.
and I can continue with that whilst there's another individual that's being the contact point.
Okay.
So they can keep people updated.
Yes, yeah.
So that's the way that we're really able to keep building on those relationships, and also make sure that everybody's informed of what's going
Yeah.
on and the statuses of transactions without having to be chased.
Yeah. How do you or Blacks keep up with changes in legislation in the property industry?
Sure. So, as a solicitor, I have to continually keep myself up to date with legislation.
Yeah.
I'm a member of the Law Society, and as part of applying for a practicing certificate each year, which you have to do,
Oh, wow.
you have to also confirm that you have kept up to training, legislation. So we have internal training sessions, external training sessions, publications that we sign up to that I regularly read. And also you have to, as a solicitor, stay up to date with current affairs. That's vital.
Yeah.
So that's one of the ways that we do it.
Okay, amazing. And how important is it that you keep up with this as a firm?
Sure.
What sort of effects can it have on the clients?
So, like I said to you, that vision statement, I'll take you back to the beginning.
Yeah.
Vision statement is being a trusted advisor. How can you be a trusted advisor if you're not up to date with,
True.
with
Yeah.
the current law?
Yeah.
And that's key, really. We really do live and breathe this
Yeah.
vision statement.
Yeah.
And it is genuinely that we have to ensure that we're providing accurate information
Yeah.
and accurate advice, and that it is correct. Obviously, for any law firm, they don't want to be negligent.
Of course.
So that's obviously the major factor to take into consideration.
Yeah.
But genuinely, we do pride ourselves on the fact that we do keep ourselves up to date
Yeah.
with the information, and that it is key. If I know that I've got a particular client, and just in that HMO scenario that I mentioned before,
Yeah.
if they don't really know what they're doing and they don't understand the legal requirements, it's my duty to tell them
Yeah.
that they have to have such and such things in place for it
course.
to be a valid HMO.
Yeah.
So obviously, is that property in a HMO compulsory area?
Yeah.
Is it subject to an Article 4 directive?
Yeah.
Is it in the selective licence area? Has it fallen into a general planning permission? And there's various different intricacies that are involved in certain topics.
Yeah.
So my job really is to make sure that that client is protected. So that's how important it really is.
Would you say there's anything in terms of legislation that people working in the property finance industry should keep an eye on right now?
Yes, there is lots going on in the property legislation world
Yeah.
at the moment. So the main thing the government are looking at is the Renters Reform Bill.
Okay,
That's
yeah.
in the second stage of reading. Well, actually, that was actually read for the second time on the 15th of May.
Okay.
And in fairness, It's going through proposals again. Now, there's a few changes to it, but the biggest change really is the largest reform in tenanted properties since the 1990s.
Yeah.
Now, it looks to abolish ASTs, so assured short-hold tenancy agreements, so fixed-term ASTs, and it's looking to introduce periodic tenancies.
Okay.
So following a little bit like what Wales have done.
Yes,
Wales have periodic tenancies, and that was a change that had been brought in recently. The other thing that it's doing is it's going to look to abolish Section 21 no-fault evictions.
Yeah.
Now, the first reading created quite a bit of information and quite a bit of interest, purely because on first reading it looks as though it will abolish Section 21, no fault evictions for these tenants, which means that at no fault of that particular tenant, they can be served with that Section 21 notice, and they have to evict the property, obviously within time constraints. However, upon second reading, it looks as though it may only be applicable in certain circumstances. But obviously, upon the second reading, there's going to be further comments and proposals to be made. So it's all really up in the air until they actually come back with something definitive. And then finally, it's also introducing further mandatory grounds for Section 8 notices to be provided by a landlord. So that's something that's different. So there may be other sections, mandatory grounds, that are going to be introduced in which, rather than using a Section 21 notice for a landlord, they may be able to evict under a Section 8 notice. So that's slightly different. And then the other thing just to mention is EPC changes. Everybody is very hot on EPC topics.
What's happening?
It is. So the energy performance rating of a property is very interesting at the moment, purely because people want properties to be cost effective, don't they? If you've got a tenant in a property, you want to make sure that it's not going to cost you too much to run that property. Also, with the way that the government have set out proposals for EPCs, it does look as though there are going to be some changes. So currently, the EPC rating is E. At the tail end of last year, the government decided that they were going to change it to EPC rating C. However, they did a complete and utter U-turn on that and decided not to go ahead with that. So currently, as it stands, it is at rating E for the foreseeable future. However, keep your eyes peeled because I'm sure there's going to be some changes for that.
Yeah, there was a lot of uproar when that came out. So yeah, it's interesting to see what the government are going to do, but we'll see how landlords react to that in the future.
I mean, listening to the proposals initially, many landlords went out and spent quite large sums of money on making improvements to their properties. So those ones that have done that, fantastic, because I don't feel that E is going to remain the same for the foreseeable future. I do feel that there are going to be those changes. So albeit that it may seem a little preliminary, it's probably benefited those landlords in the kind of long run, of course. And the ones that haven't will obviously take a sigh of relief. You don't need to make any changes currently, but don't take too much of a sigh of relief because you will have to make those changes at some point.
Keep that money in the savings account just in case. So let's jump off legislation and talk a bit more about yourself. So in your career as a solicitor and being a woman of colour, how has diversity and inclusion affected you personally?
I mean, it affects us on a daily basis in our careers, and it doesn't matter which career you're from. You know, it could be the legal industry, the mortgage industry, or any other career, really. Diversity and inclusivity is key currently in everything that we do, and it, of course, should be. Now, just thinking back to my journey and starting out, I didn't have many role models, any inspirational models that I could look up to, that I can think of, really. You know, being a young female of colour, of Asian heritage, I set out my dream to become that solicitor, and I followed that dream. But I always think back to myself, well, actually, had I have had somebody to look up to, would that have made the process a bit easier? Would I have been able to obtain advice from somebody? Would I have been able to look up to somebody and say, actually, I want to be a little bit like that? And would I be encouraged to, had I have been teetering with the idea of being a solicitor or not? For some crazy reason, I was always adamant I wanted to be, and I always wanted to work in the legal world. So for me, that was a clear path. But for those that are perhaps considering entering into this, I mean, it may not be a clear path. And just to put it into perspective, I've got a bit of information and some stats from the Law Society that I wanted to make reference to, actually. So the Solicitors Regulation Authority collected some information in 2023, which they've published in 2024, which raised some really interesting findings. So it basically states that in their reports, proportion of women in law has risen from 48% to 53%. Wow. The proportion of Black, Asian and ethnic minority lawyers has risen from 14% to 19%. Wow. And the proportion of disabled lawyers has risen from 3% to 6%. Wow. Now, this is based on a trajectory from 2015 to 2023. Some would say that trajectory is rather slow. I like to be optimistic, and I'd like to say I would rather have it slow but rising, as opposed to going in the opposite direction. Then just looking at how senior women are in particular firms, again, the findings showed 32% of women in solicitors' firms are partners, and they're equity partners. So they've taken a share in that business. 47% are salaried partners, and actually 62% of solicitors are women in the legal industry, which is absolutely fantastic. And that's the kind of gap, narrowing of that gap that you need to see.
Yes, of course.
Now, bringing it back to the mortgage industry, I recall being at a very, very prominent mortgage industry event not so long ago. And it was an absolutely fantastic event. And I seemed to be finding myself in the position that I was the only female, the only woman of colour, and also the only solicitor in the room. Now, as much as I was quite rightly treated with equal amount of respect, I was in a room surrounded by white, middle-aged males. Perfectly fine from my perspective, but from the D&I perspective, I did sit back and take a big deep breath, and it dawned upon me that why is that the case? Why was I the only woman of colour there? And why was I the only lawyer there? And of Asian heritage, of course. It just startled me that actually that really is the case. So what does that tell me? It tells me that we need change. We need to bring about change, really.
No, I think you're completely right there. Representation is key. Even myself growing up, I didn't see a lot of black males. Actually, to be honest with you, I was initially going down the legal route.
Interesting.
But I don't know if it's because of the representation why I didn't go that route. It could have been various factors, but I definitely agree with you. It matters, and being in those rooms, especially those events, which I've been going to for the last I don't know 10 or so years. It has got better, but there's still some room for improvement. So hopefully we see that.
Of course, look at you and I.
Yeah, exactly.
So there is representation out there. I don't feel that there's enough. I want to. My hopes going forward really are for the mortgage industry to have people like you and I, and other people coming from various different backgrounds, just so that we can show that actually we are representing a group of people. And it's not just the fact that, I want to have somebody to look up to me. I want to be that inspirational model, role model for somebody else. I don't want them to feel the gap that I felt when I was growing up. I want them to see somebody like me in my position and to say, actually, I'd like to be like that. And also show to them that you can be like that, being a female, being a woman of colour. Being of Asian heritage, which I'm very proud of all three things. So why should I not be that person of inspiration for somebody else? So if I can fill that gap for somebody, that would be it would be an absolutely immense pleasure to provide that for someone.
No, that's amazing, and it actually touches on my next question. So just speaking from the perspective of diversity and inclusion, what would you say your hopes are for the industry, and how do you think we can get there?
Sure. Like I said, I want to be that inspirational role model. So obviously, my hope is that other people will feel that they have their inspirational models. Of course, obviously, I won't be the one for everybody, but for people that fit the boxes that they're looking to take. So I want more people to step up. I want people to understand that as a young individual, whatever you're looking to do, if you're looking to go into the legal industry or the mortgage industry, that you can do that and achieve that. In order to achieve that, we need to have more representation. We need to have more conversations about D&I. We need to be talking about it and raising awareness, because there are some people out there that still don't understand the differences or are aware of them, but don't really talk about it. And there's nothing to be shy about. The most important experience that you can talk about is the one that you have personally had. And you can then relate that experience and apply that experience in practice. And that's exactly what we're trying to do. So that is really my hope. I'm quite lucky at Blacks Solicitors. We do have an ethos of endorsing and supporting and growing team members. So I don't feel that as a firm that I represent and work with, that actually I've ever had anybody holding me back for that. And we don't think about D&I purely because it's a natural part of our process. I always think, excuse me, if you have to think about it, it means there's an issue and it needs to be dealt with. But if it's something that's natural to you, you really don't need to think about it. And like I said, I want to be that inspirational role model for people. So the more we talk about it, the better it is.
No, I think you're completely right. It's about not being shy about what you hope for. And MFS is a great company to, when we're talking about diversity and inclusion, I came in and I saw women and men of color in leadership positions, and it's gone right through the spine of the company, and you can see that when you walk around the office.
Because ultimately, what we're looking to do is we're changing society.
Of course,
Of course, we're talking about it in legal perspective and mortgage perspective, but we're changing people's perception.
Yes.
And this is on a universal level.
Yes.
It's not as though it's just confined to these particular areas.
Yeah.
So if we talk about it and do as much as we can, our small contributions, albeit that it may feel small, will collectively come together and 100%. Be a rather loud contribution.
Yeah. Before you go, we often like to do a quick fire roundup at the end of the episode, just for our listeners out there that are or may want to be involved in the property industry. What 3 things do you think everyone should prioritise when working with intermediaries?
Okay, so number 1, communication.
Yes.
Let's get good at talking to each other. Historically, we haven't been, really. But picking up the phone and having a conversation will solve many problems. So communicate. Second point would be education.
Yes.
Just as I've mentioned, telling each other what we do, imparting a bit of knowledge, arms people with so much more than you can think, and they need that armour to continue to be successful. And then the third thing is working together and understanding that we need each other to get to that end goal. So as long as we're working together and understanding the mutual respective parts of that transaction, we'll get to that end goal, and it will be a complete and utter smooth service. Amazing.
Communication, education, working together. Yes. I think that's a great trio there. So, okay, brilliant. Thank you so much for your time, Perdip. How do we get in touch with you? How do we connect with you?
Very simple. So we have our Blacks website. You can contact me via that. I'm also on LinkedIn. If you have a look at our Blacks YouTube channel with my videos, you'd also see my contact details on those as well. But happy to help with anything. And I just want to say thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah, me too. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and share the episode. You can access our previous episodes in all the usual places, as well as on our website at mfsuk.com/podcast. You can also stay connected with us on Instagram at @mfs_LTP. See you next time.